It's July. It's hot. The kind of where the air just sits on you. It's sticky and heavy. The kind of evening where you open the back door and get absolutely nothing. No breeze, no relief. Just the smell of cut grass going sour in the heat. It's the summer of 1977, and Ruth Lowe is standing in her kitchen in Lawndale, Illinois, doing the dishes. She can hear her kids playing out back. The usual sounds, laughing, running, the slap of sneakers on dry ground. Normal and safe. Everything exactly the way it should be. And then she hears a sound she can't immediately identify. A kind of rush. Like wind, but not quite. It was kind of wrong. It was too fast, it was too close. And then, cutting right through it, her son screaming. Not playing, not goofing around, but screaming. Ruth drops everything and runs for the door. What she sees in the backyard will stay with her. It will stay with everyone who hears this story for the rest of her life. Two enormous birds are circling overhead. They're black and massive. They're wrong in a way she can't put into words. And one of them has her son. Welcome back to Paranormal Directive 13. I am your host, Matt, and you have made a genuinely excellent decision by pressing play tonight. Tonight, we are going somewhere ancient, something that has lived in human memory for longer than most civilizations have existed, something that the original people of this continent have known about and respected and feared and prayed to for thousands of years before the first European boot ever touched North American soil. And something that people, regular, credible, sober people, are still seeing today. In Pennsylvania, in Texas, in Illinois, right now, in the modern world, with smartphones and satellite coverage and the full weight of 21st century skepticism bearing down on every unexplained thing. Tonight, we're talking about the Thunderbird. Now, before we go anywhere, I want to give a shout out to Owen. Now, Owen messaged me on YouTube and really asked me very nicely if I would do an episode on the Thunderbird forum and if I could give him a shout out. So, Owen, I don't know exactly what you were hoping for when you asked me that, but I promise you that I went deep on the Thunderbird tonight. Like, genuinely deep. So, you opened a door, buddy. So let me take you back to that backyard. Lawndale, Illinois is not a place most people outside of central Illinois have ever really thought about. It's a small town, it's quiet, it's the kind of place where people know each other and where the same families have lived on the same streets for generations. In 1977, it was even smaller and even quieter. July 25th was a Thursday. The sun had been brutal all week long, and by evening, the air had that particular quality that summer evenings in the Midwest can get. Thick and golden, and somehow both beautiful and oppressive at the same time. The kind of evening that makes you feel like anything could happen, if you know what I mean. Ruth Lowe was inside, doing the dishes, the mundane machinery of domestic life running on autopilot, while her mind was probably somewhere else entirely. Her kids were outside, and specifically, her 10-year-old son, Marlon, was out there with a couple of neighborhood kids doing what 10-year-olds do on a hot July night. He was running around, burning energy, being loud and alive, and completely oblivious to anything weird happening in the world. And here's where I want you to really picture this. Because the moment before something terrible happens, that last second of absolute normalcy, is almost always the part nobody talks about. We always skip to the horror, but for just a second, sit in that kitchen with Ruth, the warm water on her hands, the sounds of her kids drifting in through the screen door, everything exactly right. And then a shadow, not a cloud, it was still light out, still that golden hour glow, just a shadow, a big one, moving fast across the yard, and Marlon's laughter stops. According to witnesses, and there were multiple witnesses, two enormous birds came in low over the yard, low enough that people nearby could see them clearly, low enough that Marlon Lowe, standing in his own backyard, was suddenly very much within reach. One of the birds, and I want to be precise because this is the detail that makes this story different from almost every other giant bird report. One of the birds grabbed him, not brushed him, not knocked him over, but grabbed him by the back of his shirt or possibly under his arms. It counts very slightly on the exact point of contact. And it lifted him off the ground. The boy was lifted approximately 2 feet into the air and carried a short distance. Ruth Lowe burst out of that back door. What she saw, she described these birds as black, almost entirely black, with a notable white ring around the neck. And they were standing approximately 4 feet tall. Their wingspans and tails were at least 10 feet long. She didn't freeze, and you gotta give some credit to Ruth, but I think also a lot of people, when their kids are in danger, kind of jump to acting without thinking. So like if it was like a friend or yourself, you'd probably freeze. But being your kid, I think most people, if you're a good parent, is gonna rush right out there without even thinking of any danger. Ruth ran at the bird, screaming, waving her arms, charging straight at this thing that was holding her child. And the bird dropped Marlin. He was shaken and he was scared, but he was physically okay. No serious injuries, just a 10-year-old boy who had just experienced something that would mark him for the rest of his life. Now here's the thing that doesn't get talked about enough in these stories, is what happens after. Because Marlin Lowe survived, but in some ways what came next was its own kind of ordeal. The Lowe family told their story, and some people believed them. The local authorities took it seriously enough to investigate, particularly because there were multiple witnesses, including a man named James D. Daniels who corroborated the account. But other people were pretty cruel about it. Kids at school started calling Marlin Bird Boy, and it didn't stop there. Skeptics, people who had decided the story was a hoax before they'd heard a single detail, started throwing dead pigeons at the Lowe's family house. Dead pigeons at a family whose kid had just been traumatized. You know, people are assholes. There's not really a better way to put it. Now, the description Ruth gave of those birds is fascinating. Black with a white ring around the neck, enormous wingspan, aggressive predatory behavior. Some experts suggest it might have been an Andean condor. The white ring around the neck could fit that description, and the wingspan of a condor, which is up to about 10 feet, is the right range. But here's the problem. Actually, there's a few problems. One, Andean condors are not native to Illinois. They're not native to anywhere in North America outside of the Andes. So you need to explain what one was doing in Lawndale in 1977. Two, actually, not even just one. Now, number two. Andean condors are scavengers. They eat carrion, which is rotten meat. They do not hunt live prey. They do not grab living children. The idea that a condor would swoop down and attempt to carry off a 10-year-old boy is, to put it gently, completely inconsistent with everything we know about condor behavior. And three, the bird lifted him. It wasn't a glancing blow. It wasn't a startled bird flapping too close. It picked him up and carried him. Even briefly, for that to happen, you need a bird with not just wingspan, but muscle mass and carrying capacity. Biologists note that a bird's carrying capacity is roughly proportional to its body weight, typically around 1 pound of prey per pound of bird. A 10-year-old boy in 1977 would have weighed somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 to 80 pounds. For a bird to lift 60 plus pounds, even briefly, we're talking about an animal of genuinely extraordinary size. An animal that, according to mainstream science, shouldn't exist. And yet, Ruth Lowe saw what she saw. Multiple other people saw what they saw. And this family's life was changed forever by whatever came down out of that Illinois sky on a hot Thursday evening in July. The real question, is what was it? And to start answering that question, we have to look at the history. Because Lawndale is not the beginning of the story, not by a long shot. The Thunderbird has been here a lot longer than we have. Now, let's be straight up. The Thunderbird is not a cryptid. I mean, It is now in the way the word gets used in paranormal circles, but that's a modern label being pasted over something much older and much more significant. The Thunderbird is a sacred figure, a spiritual being, a central character in cosmologies of dozens of indigenous nations across North America. And when we talk about it as a mysterious creature that people are spotting over Pennsylvania highways, we need to hold that original meaning alongside the modern mystery, or we're doing a disservice to the story and the people it belongs to. So let's go back, way, way back. Among the Anishinaabe people, also known as the Ojibwe, the Thunderbird is called Anamiki. And Anamiki is not just a big bird, it's a guardian and a warrior, an entity that exists specifically to protect the human world from forces that would consume it. The Anishinaabe cosmology operates on two great axes, the upper world and the lower world. The upper world is the sky, power, authority, clarity, order. The lower world is the water, specifically what lies beneath it. And what lies beneath it, according to tradition, are the Misikinubik, the great horned serpents, underwater beings of chaos and malevolence that would, if left unchecked, swallow the land and everything on it. The Anamiki was created, specifically, according to some traditions, by the cultural hero and trickster figure Nanabozo, to be the counterbalance, to hold the line. And when the clouds roll in off the Great Lakes, when you hear that first crack of thunder over the water, that is the Anamiki arriving. The flapping of its wings produces the thunder. The lightning that forks down toward the lake, that's not random, that's intentional. That's the Anamiki driving back the serpents, pinning them beneath the waves, keeping the balance. Now here's where it gets really interesting. If you were Anishinaabe and you encountered the Thunderbird, not in a storm, but personally, in a vision or a dream, that was not considered a good time. It was considered a calling, a weight placed on you. It could mean you were being summoned to medicine work. It could mean you had transgressed against sacred law and were being warned. The Thunderbird, in the Anishinaabe tradition, is also a moral arbiter. It does not just fight monsters, it watches. Further west on the Great Plains, the Lakota Sioux call this being Wakinyan, from the word for winged ones. And the Lakota version of the Thunderbird is, if anything, even stranger and more powerful than the Anishinaabe version. Because the Wakinyan is not really a bird at all, not in any literal sense. It's a spirit, a force, something formless and multicolored that can take different shapes depending on who is perceiving it and under what circumstances. To encounter the Wakinyan in a vision, which is how most encounters happen in Lakota tradition, is to be marked for profound transformation. For some people, it becomes the path to becoming a medicine man or a healer. For others, it makes you a heyoka. The heyoka is what you might call a sacred clown, someone who's been touched by the storm, by the raw chaotic energy of the Wakinyan, and who is now required to move through the world backwards, doing things in reverse, wearing clothes wrong, shivering in the heat, acting contrary to expectations, because the Wakinyan is the embodiment of duality, of the contrary nature of the universe. Rain brings life and also destroys. Thunder is terrifying and also signals that the crops will grow. The storm takes and the storm gives, simultaneously, without apology. If you've been touched by that energy, you carry it. You become a mirror that shows people the inside of things by doing everything outside. You become a mirror that shows people the inside of things by doing everything outside out. And that's not mythology. That is sophisticated philosophical thinking dressed in a story. And it's been here for thousands of years. And then there's a version from the Pacific Northwest. I'm not doing the view. From the Kwakwakiwak, the Thunderbird is so immense that it hunts killer whales. Not fish, but whales. It swoops down over the ocean and pulls an orca out of the water the way an eagle takes a salmon. Think about that for a second. An orca can weigh up to 12,000 pounds. This is a being that makes that look like a snack. The Northwest Thunderbird is also a shapeshifter. In some stories, it removes its feathers like a coat and walks among humans in human form. It has intervened in human crises. There are traditions of the Thunderbird guiding people to safety during great floods. In exchange for this protection, the people honor it. And this is why the Thunderbird sits at the very top of totem poles, the highest position, the bridge between the celestial realm and the terrestrial one. It's not at the top because it's scary. It's at the top because it's the most powerful protector. Across all of these traditions, there are consistent threats: storm connection, thunder from its wings, lightning from its eyes or its weapons, opposition to water-dwelling serpentine forces, moral authority over the community, massive, almost inconceivable scale, and the deep, deep truth that the weather is not random, that the sky is alive, and that something is up there paying attention. Now, hold on to that thought, that very ancient, very serious thought, and carry it forward through the rest of this, because we're about to leave the sacred and enter the sensational. And the sensational is where things get complicated. April 26th, 1890. Tombstone, Arizona is in trouble. Now, you might know Tombstone from the OK Corral, from Wyatt Earp, from the mythology of the Wild West. But by 1890, the gunfighters were mostly gone and the real crisis was economic. An earthquake had shifted the ground, flooded the silver mines that the entire town's prosperity had been built on, and Tombstone was slowly, quietly dying. The Tombstone Epitaph, which is one of the greatest newspaper names in American history, was the local paper. And on April 26th, they ran a story. Two ranchers traveling through the arid flats between the Whetstone and Huachuca Mountains came across something in the desert. They described it as a winged monster. It appeared to be exhausted, capable only of short, labored flights, unable to sustain altitude. The ranchers, being men of their time and context, did what any armed frontiersman might do when they encountered something from a nightmare. They got their Winchesters out and they chased it. After a pursuit of several miles, which, if you've ever been to that part of Arizona, it is brutal country, they managed to wound it. The creature turned on them. They described its eyes as the size of dinner plates, bulging with fury. Several more well-placed shots brought it down. And here's where the account gets genuinely extraordinary. The ranchers measured it. 92 feet in length. A wingspan that, when straightened out, was 160 feet. 160 feet. For reference, the wingspan of a Boeing 747 is about 211 feet. So we are talking about something in the neighborhood of a commercial airliner walking around the Arizona desert. This creature had no feathers, no hair. Its body was covered in a smooth, almost transparent membrane. Its jaws were lined with sharp, strong teeth. The ranchers cut off a section of one wing as evidence, apparently intending to send the hide east for scientific examination. Neither the specimen nor the wingtip ever showed up in any documented scientific record. Now, the Tombstone story alone would be a curiosity. An interesting frontier tall tale, possibly exaggerated, possibly invented, possibly somewhere in between. What turned it into one of the most persistent mysteries in American paranormal history is something that came later: the photograph. For decades, literally decades, thousands of researchers, writers, and interested people have claimed to have memory of seeing a specific photograph. The image, as described by people who swear they saw it, shows a group of men in cowboy hats standing in front of a massive pterodactyl-like creature. The creature is nailed to the side of a barn, spread eagle, its enormous wings spanning the full width of the structure. The men are dwarfed by it. People remember it in remarkable detail. The clothes, the barn, the posture of the men, the overwhelming scale of the creature beside them. In 1963, a writer named Jack Pearl published a piece in Saga magazine claiming the photo had appeared in the epitaph back in 1886. Other writers followed, making similar claims, saying the image had circulated nationally. But here's the problem. Nobody can produce it. Intensive searches of the epitaph archives, of newspaper archives across the country, of photography collections from the era. Nothing. The original 1890 article contained no photograph at all, no image, just words. What researchers have ended up dealing with is what some call confabulation, a specific kind of false memory where the brain constructs a vivid, detailed recollection of something that it never actually experienced, usually triggered by a powerful verbal or written description. Think of like giving your brain an AI image prompt and picturing what that would look like in your head. The account of the Tombstone Creature was written in such visceral detail that it may have literally generated a visual memory in the minds of readers, a memory so convincing that it felt like something they had actually seen. Some people think the photograph might actually exist but has been lost, buried in a private collection somewhere, misattributed, misfiled, waiting to be rediscovered. Some think it was a fake created for a TV show or film production that people later mistook for a historical artifact. A few have even suggested that the image exists, but that it keeps disappearing, that something or someone or some force doesn't want it found. Now, I can't tell you which of those explanations is 100% right, because I genuinely don't know. What I do know is that the Tombstone Creature, real or legend, shares something significant with the reports we have already talked about. That description: smooth or leathery skin instead of feathers, teeth in the jaws, a profile that sounds less like a bird and more like something that predates birds by roughly 66 million years. Now, we'll come back to that. Now, another note on the tombstone photo. When I was researching this, I could have sworn I've seen this photo before myself. I can picture it exactly the way I described it in my head. Like, I swear I have seen this photo, and I can't find it anywhere. Like, it does not exist. And I'm sure a lot of you listening are probably thinking the same thing. Like, no, I've seen the picture of the bird, and apparently it doesn't exist. Now, whether that's another Mandela effect, or it's just like we were talking about, confabulation, and we just all have created this idea in our heads, I don't know, but it's interesting nonetheless. Okay, so we've had 1890 and we've had 1977. But right in the middle, sandwiched between those two events, there was a period of about 2 months in early 1976 where an entire region of Texas collectively lost its mind. Also, I think that was a little exaggerated where I said this was sandwiched right in the middle, because it's obviously very close to 1977, but, it made for a good sentence in the paragraph there. The Rio Grande Valley Flap, and in cryptozoology, flap is the term for a concentrated cluster of sightings in one area over a short period. They use it for UFOs, they use it for Bigfoots, they use it for anything that you see a lot of happening in one small area over a short amount of time. The Rio Grande Valley Flap started in the first days of January 1976 and lasted through February. It involved multiple witnesses, multiple locations, and at least one genuinely violent encounter. They called it the Texas Big Bird. Some people called it Big Abby. Local radio stations were talking about it. Oil tycoons were offering rewards for its capture. This was not a quiet event. It all starts on New Year's Day. 2 teenagers, Tracy Lawson and Jackie Davies, were outside when they encountered a 5-foot-tall bird standing in the yard staring at them. They described it with red eyes and a hunched posture. The kind of thing that, if you encountered it on New Year's Day, would make you immediately question every decision that led you to be outside at that moment. They went inside, and the next morning, their parents found enormous 3-toed tracks in the yard. 3 toes, the kind of configuration you see on large prehistoric birds. The kind of configuration that is notably different from the typical 4-toed track of modern birds. About 2 weeks in, the reports escalated dramatically. A man named Alberto Guajardo in Brownsville claimed that something slammed into his mobile home with enormous force. He described the creature as unlike any bird he'd ever seen. He said it was, and this is a quote that's genuinely interesting, he said it was not like a bird from this world. That is a really interesting thing to say. Not a really big bird or a weird bird, but specifically not from this world. And then on January 14th, 1976, in Raymondville, Armando Grimaldo was outside his house, smoking a cigarette, minding his own business, when something attacked him from above. He described the sound first, a tremendous flapping, enormous wings and fast. And then it was on him. He felt talons raking across his back. His shirt was torn. He was physically injured. And by the time it was over, Grimaldo was reportedly in a state of shock. His clothes were ripped. He had scratches on his back. This was not a misidentification. This was a man who was attacked in the dark by something with large enough talons to shred fabric and break skin. The most credible daytime sighting of the Texas flap happened on February 24, 1976, southwest of San Antonio, when 3 schoolteachers, David Rendon, Libby Vasick, and Deanie Ford, were carpooling to work. A massive shadow swept over their vehicle. They looked up and saw a creature gliding just above the power lines, low enough that they could see its wings clearly. And what Rendon described, now David Rendon was a school teacher, a professional, someone with no real reason to fabricate this. What he described was a wing structure that was bony and jointed, not feathered the way a bird's wings are feathered, but structured more like a bat's wing, or like something that wasn't quite bird at all. The creature glided over them in silence and was gone. And then, as suddenly as it all started, the Texas big bird vanished. March came, the sighting stopped, and the reward money went unclaimed. Whatever it was, it had gone somewhere else. Some researchers suggest it went back into the Sierra Madre, the mountain range that runs through northern Mexico just south of the Rio Grande Valley, a range, incidentally, that contains some of the most remote and least surveyed wilderness in North America. The bony wing structure reported by the San Antonio teachers keeps coming back, because that is not how bird wings work. That is how pterosaur wings work. That is a description of a membrane stretched between elongated finger bones, the defining physical characteristic of the prehistoric flying reptiles that ruled the skies for over 160 million years. And yes, we are absolutely going to talk about pterosaurs. But first, we need to talk about Pennsylvania. If you were building a map of thunderbird sightings in the United States, and people have, obsessive, wonderful people, Pennsylvania would be lit up like a Christmas tree. Specifically, 2 regions, the remote north-central counties known as the Black Forest and Chestnut Ridge, the long Appalachian Ridge southeast of Pittsburgh that has, over the past several decades, developed a reputation as one of the most genuinely strange places in the American Northeast. The history of Pennsylvania thunderbird sightings was largely shaped by a man named Robert Lyman Sr., who spent much of the mid-20th century collecting accounts from the northern counties. Lyman himself claimed a sighting in 1940 near Coudersport. He described a brown bird standing approximately 4 feet tall with a wingspan he estimated at 25 feet, a measurement he made by comparing it to the width of the road he was standing on. So think about that. A bird using the full width of a 2-lane road as a wingspan. That it's not a heron, that's not a crane, that's not any bird currently recognized by science. Lyman's chronicles include a report from 1892. A man named Fred Murray, who saw a flock of 5 or 6 birds near Dent's Run with wingspans he estimated at 16 feet, a flock, not 1, not 2, but 5 or 6 of them, flying together. And in 1969, a woman named Sarah Boyle was standing near Little Pine Creek when a bird standing nearby took flight. Its wingspan, when extended, spanned the entire width of the creek. And that creek is 70 feet wide. So, again, 70 feet. Now, more recently, the action has shifted south to Chestnut Ridge. Now, this is an area that paranormal researchers have taken to calling a gateway to the mysterious, not just because of the bird sightings, but because of the sheer concentration of unusual events in the area. There's UFO sightings, there's Bigfoot reports, there's electromagnetic anomalies, the kind of place where the rules seem to be slightly different. Stan Gordon, a Pennsylvania researcher who has been investigating strange phenomena in the state for decades and maintains a 24-hour reporting hotline, has collected a remarkable number of thunderbird accounts from this region. In just 10 months between January and October of 2024, 8 separate sightings were reported in the Chestnut Ridge area alone. 8 in 1 year in one region. One of the most detailed modern accounts from Pennsylvania comes from 2001. a 45-year-old cyclist named John Bolden was riding through South Greensburg when he saw a bird standing in a meadow, 7 feet tall, silvery gray, and when it took flight, he had a clear view of its wingspan. He estimated 18 feet, and he described the wing movement as slow, wave-like, laborious, he said, like something that was very, very heavy moving through the air. He compared the size of the bird in flight to a Piper Cub, which is a small aircraft. Now, Bolden didn't frame this as a ghost story or supernatural visitation. He was adamant that what he saw was a physical animal, a real creature of flesh and blood in staggering, improbable size. There's a pattern in these Pennsylvania accounts that deserves attention. The birds described are almost always seen near or just before storms. The wingbeats, when audible, are described as thunderous, not metaphorically, but literally producing a booming percussive sound. The sightings cluster in specific geographic corridors, as if the birds follow particular routes through the mountains, as if they live there, kind of like they've always lived there. So let's do what investigators do and see if we can find kind of the shape of this thing. When you lay all of these accounts side by side, spanning from the 1890s to literally 2 years ago, the one thing you see is the consistency. It's not perfect consistency. Eyewitness accounts never are. But the core features keep showing up. The same features across different decades, different states, different witnesses who never knew each other and in many cases didn't even know the other accounts existed. Almost every significant Thunderbird sighting either occurs immediately before a storm or in the immediate aftermath. Lawndale in 1977 was a hot, charged pre-storm evening. Multiple Pennsylvania accounts note overcast skies or impending weather. The Texas flap occurred during January and February, which is in the heart of the Gulf Coast storm season. This connection is so consistent that researchers have started calling it storm riding. The theory that these creatures use storm systems the way albatrosses use wind currents, gliding on the energy of the atmospheric disturbance and kind of riding the storm itself, which, by the way, is exactly what the Indigenous traditions have always said. Wingspans described in these accounts range from about 10 feet on the low end, which is still significantly larger than any living bird, up to the truly staggering numbers from Pennsylvania and the historical accounts. What's notable is not just the size, but how witnesses respond to it. Almost universally, people describe a moment of cognitive dissonance. Their brain initially tells them that they're seeing a known bird, a hawk, a vulture, or a crane, and then something overrides that because the scale is off, the proportions are wrong. The reality testing mechanism kicks in and it says, no, that is not a turkey vulture, that is something else. That specific experience of seeing something familiar but wrong is a really important data point because it suggests these aren't people who looked up and immediately hallucinated a monster. They're people who looked up, started to file it normally, and then couldn't. The flight behavior described is also remarkably consistent. Only a couple of the witnesses report fast, aggressive flight. Almost all of them describe gliding, long, extended glides with very minimal wing movement. When the wings do move, they move slowly, a deep rolling wave motion that observers consistently describe as laborious or effortful. This is not the behavior of a large hawk or an eagle. Hawks are dynamic, fast, highly maneuverable. What's being described sounds much more like a soaring bird, a bird that uses thermals and atmospheric lift to travel enormous distances with minimal energy expenditure. A bird that has evolved for or is adapted to sustained high-altitude gliding. Now, 3 regions appear again and again. North-central Pennsylvania, the Black Forest, the Ohio-Indiana-Illinois corridor, with particular concentration around Lawndale and the Mississippi River Bluffs, and the Rio Grande Valley in northern Mexico. All 3 of these regions share specific characteristics: remote terrain, relatively low human population density, proximity to major river systems, and distinct topographic features that create consistent wind patterns and thermal activity. If you were a very large flying creature and you needed to remain undetected while accessing the food sources and atmospheric conditions you required to survive, you would probably pick these exact regions. So we have a consistent physical description. We have consistent behavioral patterns. We have consistent geography. And we have a connection to specific atmospheric conditions, all across accounts spanning more than a century. So what do we do with all of that? Let's look at the potential explanations. Theory 1 is misidentification. Yes. So let's get this one out of the way right at the start. Some Thunderbird sightings are almost certainly misidentified known birds. Turkey vultures have a wingspan of up to 6 feet and a silver lining on their underwings that can catch light in striking ways. Great blue herons, which have wingspans of about 6 feet as well, are often seen at dusk near water and can look strikingly large and prehistoric in silhouette. Pelicans have been mistaken for much larger birds at distance. And human beings are genuinely terrible at estimating the size of things in the sky, especially when there's no frame of reference. A large bird seen against a featureless sky at an unusual angle can appear dramatically larger than it is. So yes, misidentification is a real thing, and it explains some portion of the reports. But here's why it doesn't explain the whole picture. It doesn't explain Ruth Lowe's son being lifted 2 feet off the ground. You cannot misidentify that part. It doesn't explain Armando Grimaldo's torn clothing and scratched back. It doesn't explain the 3 teachers observing bony, jointed wing structure at close range over a highway. It doesn't explain the consistency of 12 to 20-foot wingspan estimates from witnesses who have no reason to exaggerate and, in many cases, provided corroborating physical measurements. The misidentification theory works in the margins, but it doesn't really work at the center. Now, theory 2, that's surviving prehistoric birds. Now, this is where things get genuinely interesting. Teratornis mariami was a real bird. It was not mythological. It was not cryptid. It had a wingspan of approximately 12 feet, a powerful hooked beak, and a predatory body plan. It likely fed on large prey rather than acting as a pure scavenger. It went extinct approximately 10,000 years ago, at the end of the Pleistocene, the same mass extinction event that took the mammoths and the ground sloths and the American horses. 10,000 years. That's a very long time, but it's not deep time. It's not dinosaurs. 10,000 years ago, human beings were already here, already hunting and already telling stories. Some researchers have suggested that at least some indigenous oral traditions about the Thunderbird may preserve genuine memories of Teratornis. Encounters that were real, that were witnessed, that got woven into story and passed down through generations. The consistent description of the Thunderbird's enormous size, its predatory behavior, its ability to carry large prey, all of this fits Teratornis much better than it fits any currently living bird. The question is whether any population could have survived into the modern era. Mainstream paleontology says no, but 10,000 years is a blink in geological time. And North America contains vast areas of remote wilderness that are genuinely unexplored. The Black Forest of Pennsylvania, the mountains of northern Mexico, the remote mountain ranges of the Pacific Northwest. Could a small, reclusive population of very large birds have survived in those corridors, adapted to staying out of sight, evolving toward what researchers are calling biological stealth, moving at night, roosting in inaccessible terrain, avoiding the kind of sustained human contact that would result in a specimen being collected? I'm not saying yes, but I'm not going to say it's impossible. Now, theory 3, and this one is one of my favorites. The pterosaur. So, take a deep breath. The pterosaur theory is the one that scientific orthodoxy most firmly rejects, and I understand why. Pterosaurs went extinct 66 million years ago in the Cretaceous mass extinction. That's not 10,000 years, that's 66 million years. That is a gap in the fossil record so enormous that bridging it requires either a radical revision of our understanding of extinction or something else entirely. But the descriptions from Tombstone smooth membrane instead of feathers, teeth in the jaws, the bony wing structure described by San Antonio teachers in 1976, the bat-like wings that keep appearing in reports across decades. These are not descriptions of birds. They are, point-by-point, descriptions of pterosaurs. Also, this ties in to the Van Meter visitor sighting as well. Now, the largest known pterosaur, Quetzalcoatlus northropi, had a wingspan of up to 35 feet. It was found in Texas, specifically in Big Bend, which is essentially the Rio Grande Valley region. Its remains are embedded in the very ground where the Texas Big Bird sightings happened in 1976. Is it possible that the indigenous peoples of the Southwest discovered pterosaur fossils and incorporated them into their cosmologies? Almost certainly. Is it possible that the oral traditions of the Thunderbird contain distorted but genuine physical descriptions of creatures that some people found preserved in stone? Some researchers believe so. But there are also those, and this is the minority position, who take a pterosaur theory in a more radical direction, who suggest that the impossibility of a 66 million year gap might itself be meaningful. That if these things are real, they cannot be biological survivors in the conventional sense, that they are something else. And that brings us to the fourth theory, which is the supernatural, portal entities and tulpa storms. In the paranormal research community, particularly among people who study the Chestnut Ridge area of Pennsylvania, the Thunderbird is often discussed alongside UFO sightings, Bigfoot encounters, and what researchers call high strangeness, a concentration of unexplainable events in a specific geographic area. The Thunderbird, in this framework, is not a biological animal. It is something that exists at the boundary between the physical and the non-physical, something that manifests under specific conditions, atmospheric conditions, emotional conditions, possibly something to do with geomagnetic properties, and then retreats back into whatever state it normally occupies. A portal entity, something from another dimension, another layer of reality, that periodically bleeds through. And the thing with this theory that I can't quite dismiss, even though it makes the rational part of my mind a little uncomfortable, even though the rational part of my mind is pretty small, it's not that different from what the Lakota have been saying for thousands of years. Wakinyan is not a bird. It is a spiritual force that can take physical form under certain conditions. It exists in the upper world and descends into this one when circumstances call for it. It is fundamentally not of this realm. The interdimensional being theory and the Lakota cosmology are structurally saying the same thing. They're using different vocabularies, one scientific sounding and one spiritual, but the underlying concept is identical, which raises the question, is it possible that indigenous people spent thousands of years directly observing and accurately describing an actual phenomenon, and that modern Western science has been spending the last century and a half slowly and laboriously catching up? That one, I don't have an answer for you. So let's just come back to something important before we close everything up tonight. In modern paranormal culture, the Thunderbird has been lumped in with Bigfoot and lake monsters and shadow people. It appears on cable TV shows with dramatic reenactments and expert panels of people who have written books about it. It has been the subject of hundreds of hours of YouTube content and Reddit threads and podcast episodes, including this one. And there's nothing wrong with that. Mysteries deserve investigation. The stories deserve to be told. But I do think it's important to remember what this figure is at its root. The Thunderbird is a sacred being in living religions, not dead mythologies, not ancient history, but active practice, deeply held spiritual beliefs that are still part of the lives of millions of indigenous people today. The Anishinaabe still recognize Anamiki in the storms over the Great Lakes. The Lakota still understand Wakinyan as a force that moves through the world and marks certain people. The Pacific Northwest nations still carve the Thunderbird at the top of totem poles, not as decoration, but as an act of honoring a relationship that their people have maintained for centuries. Kwakwaka'wakw tell the story of the Thunderbird who transformed into human form to help their people survive a flood That's not mythology in the dismissive sense that that word sometimes carries. That is their history. That is a record of a relationship between a people and a being or force that intervened on their behalf. Whether you interpret that relationship literally or spiritually or allegorically, the relationship itself is real. It has real weight, it has real meaning to real people right now. So, as we're chasing this thing through the skies over Pennsylvania and Illinois and the Arizona desert, I think we owe it to ourselves to carry that understanding with us. This is not just a cryptid. This is not just a flying monster to hunt. This is something that has been part of human consciousness on this continent for longer than Western civilization has existed. Something that might have been seen and named and respected by people who were watching the sky more carefully than we are, and something that might be watching back. Now let's go back to Lawndale. Now let's just go back to Illinois one more time, because the Lawndale incident didn't happen in a vacuum. There is a creature in the oral traditions of the Illini people, the tribe for whom Illinois is named, called the Piasa bird. It is a being of enormous size and predatory ferocity, depicted in paintings on the bluffs of the Mississippi River near Alton, Illinois. These paintings, now partially reconstructed, as the original images were damaged over centuries of weathering and human interference, show a creature with wings, a long tail, deer antlers, and a face somewhere between a man and a predator. A composite of terror, according to the traditions that have been preserved. The Piasa was a bird that fed on human beings. Not occasionally, but routinely. It swooped down on fully grown men, and it carried them away. French explorers encountered references to the Piasa in the 17th century, recording the river bluff paintings and the oral traditions attached to them. These are not recent inventions. These are centuries-old accounts of flying predators in the Illinois River Valley that specifically targeted human beings. And then, in 1977, Marlon Lowe is in his backyard in Lawndale, Illinois, 100 miles from those bluffs, and something comes down out of the sky and grabs him. I'm not sure that's coincidence. That sounds more like continuity. I think the Piasa bird and the Lawndale creature and the ancient thunderbird traditions are all different names for and different encounters with the same ongoing phenomenon, whatever that phenomenon is. Thunderbird sightings have not stopped. They are not relics of a less skeptical era. They're happening now to people with smartphones and access to Wikipedia and every rational reason in the world to come up with a different explanation. And they still can't. Something is out there. Something enormous and dark and old. Something that moves with the storms. Something that people of this continent have known about and respected and named for thousands of years. Whether it is an actual biological creature, a spiritual force, a phenomenon that doesn't fit cleanly into either category, I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. Not currently. But the next time a storm rolls in, and the next time you hear that first roll of thunder in the distance and feel the air pressure shift and look up at the sky going dark, just for a second, consider the possibility you're not hearing weather. Consider the possibility that something is coming. Something with wings so large that their beat shakes the air like thunder. Something that has been here longer than your house, longer than your town, longer than your country. Something that is watching the world below with enormous, ancient eyes. And it knows you're there. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode on the Thunderbird. I gotta give a big shout out again to Owen. Now, Owen commented on a video. Owen is 11 years old, and he said he's an Indigenous person. He loves Thunderbird. He loves the stories around the Thunderbird. He claims he may have seen a Thunderbird, and he really wanted me to do an episode on it. And I was like, bro, I gotta do something for this kid. So I put this together, and I made a Thunderbird episode for him. So Owen, I really hope this scratched that itch that you have, and that you really enjoyed it, and it covered everything, and it really was what you were looking for. I really hope that I was able to do that for you. But everyone else, keep the suggestions coming. I love doing episodes that have been suggested that people want to hear besides just the stuff that I'm into. I have a list of a couple other episodes to do, and then I have a list of the things that I really want to do. I do want to revisit some older episodes too. Um, Van Meter, Blue Book, Philadelphia Experiment. I don't think my early episodes really truly did them justice the way that, my storytelling and our process has evolved over the past year. So I'm probably going to start releasing them, some read and rehashes of some of the older episodes as like a Saturday drop here in the next couple of weeks. So you can look forward to a couple extra bonus episodes on there. So keep an eye out for those. If you like the episode, please leave a rating, leave a review, share the show, comment, share it to anyone you know. If anyone's into Thunderbirds or aliens or ghosts or cryptids or anything like that I talk about all the time, share the show and let's reach a whole nother level of people on this show. Also, check out the social medias, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all at Paranormal Directive 13, of course. And check out the Patreon, patreon.com/Paranormal Directive 13, where for just $5 a month, you can get a shout out of your name on an episode. And Owen got his shout out for free because he's a kid. And I wanted to be nice, and I thought it was really cool of him to ask me. So, Owen, you got your shout out for free, bud. And then for $7 a month, you can get a shout out. All of these tiers come with access to bonus episodes and all that. But for $7, you get a shout out, and you also become a member of the Mantis Research Fund. Now, the Mantis Research Fund is money we are using to help anyone who has been affected by mantis entities. And by help, I mean it's going to help me get more equipment and better stuff and do more episodes and better episodes. So check that out. And remember, guys, next time you hear a storm rolling in, take a look outside and see if something might be watching you back.